Cool.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to the webinar. As part of our webinar series, this WeChat group, Presenting Kids, is happy to have Jessie Feng to talk on the topic of debate and related national competitions. You should be able to see on the screen that Jessie is sharing her screen, and the title of this presentation is Debates, Presentation, and Public Speaking. Let me give you a brief introduction of Jessie Feng. And for our group members, many people know her already. Jess recently graduated from Johns Hopkins University with a dual degree in International Studies and Economics. Jess is very good at writing and really loves public speaking and be very good at it. Jess completed the Model UN and Model Congress competitions through high school and winning both individual and school awards. She was also a member of New Jersey's championship team in their most well-known We the People constitutional debate competition. And she won third place at a national competition in Washington, D.C. In college, Jess spent all 4 years on the staff of Johns Hopkins Model UN Conference, and this is the most well-known and the largest competition in the country. In addition to planning and organizing the conference, she served as a committee chair for 3 committees and was executive member as a director of General Assembly committees. Jess expanded her interest in debating out of school by teaching and designing debate programs. And here we are very lucky to have her because Jess recently graduated and Jess is a very experienced debater. And for many parents, especially for young middle school students, a lot of parents heard about debate teams. A lot of parents have a lot of questions because debating, how to prepare for it, how much time does it take, how much commitment, what should I do? Those are the questions, are the topics of this presentation. And now Jess is ready. So without further ado, let me give the presentation to Jessie Feng. So Jess, go ahead.
Hi everyone, and thanks for being so welcoming and having me here. So I'm going to, in this presentation, I know debating is a very large topic, so I'm going to try to address as many of your questions as I can and use as much of my experiences from debating, from teaching, and as a competition organizer and judge to try to give an overall view of what it is to debate, present, and do public speaking. So I'm going to go over this really quickly, and thanks, Louis, for doing the introduction. So a lot of this you already mentioned. So I just graduated from Johns Hopkins. I have a lot of debate experience. I basically spent half my life involved in debate, starting from freshman year of high school with Model Congress, and that continued throughout college. And I really enjoyed doing it, so I've also designed debate programs for summer camps and learning centers. I did get one question in there. One parent asked, what high school did I go to? I'm in New Jersey, so I went to East Brunswick High School. If anyone's from East Brunswick, we have a very excellent debate program, particularly in Model UN and We the People. So definitely, if your child is interested, take advantage of that. I know New Jersey overall has very, very strong debate teams. That's just something we've noticed by running the debate and competition circuits. So without further ado, different types of debate. So debate, this is by all means not a complete list of the different types of debates you can be involved in school activity-wise. These are just the major ones that I've seen. And again, I live in Jersey, so there's a lot of debate activity that happens here, but across the country, I know it varies by state and region. Some of my friends from California and Oregon and Washington State, they've done activities that I've never even heard of. So definitely know that this is by all means not an exhaustive list. I put Model Congress and Model UN at the top because that's what I was most heavily involved in. Both of them are simulations. So Model Congress acts very much like the U.S. Congress. They deal with domestic issues, and students represent either a senator or a House of Representative congressman in the U.S. Congress, and they debate issues like gun control, or fracking, energy policy, immigration issues, things like that. Model UN is similar in that it's a simulation as well, and it basically simulates the United Nations. And again, it's very policy oriented, but in this case, the students represent delegates from different countries, and they'll debate much more global topics. Energy and the environment is a big topic. There's also cultural rights. Sometimes they'll do crisis topics or things like freedom of the press. This past year at JUMUNC, which is this competition my school runs, we had topics like organ transplants, we had topics like human rights issues. So they try to follow the United Nations as closely as possible. These two, I personally felt like increased my speaking skill a lot. My ability to speak off the top of my head. For example, this presentation, I don't have a speech in front of me. I'm just spewing words out of my brain right now, and that's a skill that I developed at Model UN. It also really builds teamwork and leadership, and it gives you a heightened awareness of the issues around you. So whenever people ask me, what types of things their kids should get involved in high school, I always say Model UN. The next big thing is mock trial. Again, it's a simulation. It simulates a court case. So students will be witnesses, they'll be lawyers, and they basically act out something very similar to a criminal court case. This starts as early as middle school and goes on through high school. I've done this personally with elementary school students at a summer camp, and at that level we usually do fairy tales, but at the high school level they'll do actual cases like murder cases or robbery cases, things like that. So again, it's very, very teamwork intensive, and it's a lot about being able to think on your feet, which is, I think, one of the most critical skills that debating and public speaking can teach you. The next three I personally haven't done as much, but I have friends who have done it. Public forum, also known in some high schools as forensics club or forensics league, is also issue/policy oriented, but it's not as teamwork intensive, and it's much more speech based. So a lot of the times the competitors will have prepared speeches or prepared talking points that they want to discuss. The same thing goes for policy debates, which are also known as cross-examination debates, but that's more focused on U.S. issues, domestic policy issues. And the last big category is Lincoln Douglas debates, which focuses on ethical or philosophical questions. So again, this is not an exhaustive list by any means, but these are just some of the types of activities that you can get involved with. Generally, when I was in school, these were really only limited to high schoolers, but I know a lot of districts are now expanding these to middle school students as well. Which I think is good, because I think it helps to give kids an earlier exposure to these kinds of activities. Okay, so these are just some pictures of what Model UN looks like. So the picture on the left is me with my team at the conference. The picture on the right is sort of what it looks like. It's very formal. The kids get all dressed up. They represent different countries, different people, and it's a very active, very engaged type of activity. Okay, so why debate? One of the parents asked, is policy debate good? It seems not like a real debate. I personally haven't done policy debates, but my view on it is, as long as it's a debate activity, I think you'll get a lot of benefit out of it. So even starting as early as first grade, kids are doing school presentations. The school might not call it a presentation, but kids are doing show and tells. When I was in first or second grade, I think, I had to present a person that I looked up to. It was very, very short, but it was getting up in front of the class and speaking. So for me, that started as early as first grade, and it just continued. Again, extracurricular activities, as I mentioned, you have that entire list of clubs and organizations that you can get involved with. Debating, public speaking, presentation also helps immensely with college and job interviews, partially because you need to be able to sound eloquent and be able to answer questions and not have so many pauses or ums or sound like you're not confident in yourself. So debating is going to create a lot of useful skills. It helps a lot with college applications because it's a pretty big, well-known activity just across the country. So a lot of people, they know how intensive Model UN is, or they know how intensive and time-consuming public forum debates are. So when they see that on your application, they know that this is something that you're really interested in, you put time and effort into it. But that said, I don't think it's a good idea to go into debate just to get into college. I actually think that's a really stupid strategy because of how much time it takes up. If you don't really like it, it's going to be very, very hard to do well. When I was doing Model UN, just from high school throughout to college, it would take up hours of time. Like in high school, we would have to write 2 position papers per conference, 5 pages each, so that's 10 pages worth of writing per conference, and my school usually did 2 to 3 conferences a year. So you can imagine the amount of research and writing just to prep for the conference, not to mention like the 4-day conference itself. In college, we prepare an entire year. 9, 10, 11 months of preparation goes into holding one 2,000 person conference. So unless you really enjoy it and really love it, the time commitment is going to be very exhausting. So, a parent asks, 如何判断这个学生是否去上 debate? If it 不能够出成绩的话, I don't think it's a question of 能不能够出成绩. I think it's if they really like this thing and they're willing to put in that type of time commitment and that effort for the sake of enjoying it, not for a college application. And I'm sure a lot of you know in work and in business, being able to present something and debate something and answer questions on the spot is a very useful skill. On top of that, there's a lot of soft skills like confidence, posture. I've noticed a lot of my students, after they start working with me, their posture gets better because I tell them, oh, you need to stand up straight, otherwise your voice isn't loud enough. Things like, yes, it does make them a little more argumentative. That's sort of a thing that happens with debate. But that's fine because their arguments tend to make more sense. They think faster. They observe the world around them more. So there's a lot of soft skills that are involved. So is policy debate good? I don't know because I haven't done it, but I feel like any type of debate activity is beneficial. Moving on. So a lot of parents ask about age. For these activities, as I mentioned, most of them don't start until middle or high school. If your middle or high school doesn't have a club or a type of competition that you're interested in going to, there are a couple options. One of my friends at a private school, it varies year to year. Some years they have enough kids to make a team, some years they don't. On the years that they don't, I think my friend herself tried to put together a team and find an advisor to go to competition with. I know some kids try to tag onto other schools. For example, I know we had this at registration for June Month 2 years ago where one school came and then they had like extra permission slips for 3 students that weren't from their actual school but from the next town over. So definitely don't be afraid to ask your teachers, ask the administration, ask even the Board of Ed if possibly, what is the procedure for putting together a team and sending one to competition. In reality, outside of the extracurricular activities, it's never too early to start. I mean, debating it's not just, based around these couple competitions, you finish the competition and you go. Like I said, it's something that you start as early as 1st grade and it will carry you through the rest of your life, these skills. So you want your kids to, start thinking about the world around them, be very comfortable talking to people, talking in front of people, even if it's talking to you guys. Feel free to engage in discussion and debates with them about current topics. The picture I have here is from my class last year. Most of these kids had just finished 4th grade or just finished 5th grade. So half the class was elementary school kids, and they handled, this is from their Model Congress Week, they debated gun control. So it's honestly never too early to start, and these kids can handle a lot. It's just a variation of degree and content and depth you know, for example, with mock trial, in the early years, they'll do a fairy tale case, like Little Red Riding Hood versus the wolf. In high school, they'll do an actual case, like, you know, murder victim versus, or accused murderer versus, like, homicide victim's family, things like that. So it's a gradation of depth and difficulty, but the actual the actual activity itself, I don't actually think there's like an age that's too early to start. Development. So the bulk of questions I received was, you know, how do I develop their debating skills? How do I develop an interest? How do I train them for these things? 培养 was a word that kept coming up over and over again. The first question was how to do thinking and talking simultaneously, and is this essential for debating? I would say yes. I was initially a little confused by this question because I thought, well, I'm assuming if you're going to talk, you need to think about the words coming out of your mouth. But I think what the person is trying to get at is how do you make full organized sentences come out of your mouth at the same time you're talking, which is probably what the question was asking. And that honestly just comes with practice. I always tell my kids, not my kids, my students, put a filter between your mouth and your brain. And the more you do it, the faster it will come. I think writing also helps a lot with this skill, where you are always thinking in terms of sentences. You know, you don't see flower and just think flower. You see a flower and you say, in your head, there's a flower right next to me. So you want to start thinking in terms of full sentences, so when you actually open your mouth, the full sentences come out. The biggest thing I want to emphasize as far as development goes is talking and discussion. I know right now, like particularly with today's world and, you know, jobs and how busy kids are with their activities, there's not a lot of family time that goes down, but at the very least dinner time, or even if you guys don't have a family dinner time, talk in the car, you know, when you're driving them to piano lesson or swim practice or tennis practice or their art lesson or even to their debate camp program. You want to talk to them a lot, and don't just talk to them about school. You know, they're in school for over 10 hours a day. They don't want to talk about school. Talk to them about things going on in their lives, you know, who their friends are, you know, what's going on with your life at work. You know, whether or not they understand, try to talk as much as possible. The more they talk, the better they are going to be expressing themselves orally and verbally. The other thing I want to emphasize is taking advantage of current technology. So, you know, with our phones, there's WeChat, there's texting, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's all of these things that you can take advantage of. And it's very, very, very easy to share across platforms. I see something online, I can immediately share the link to my mom or to my sister or to my friend. So that's something that I didn't have growing up. And it's something that you guys can do with your kids, so take advantage of it. If you, let's say a friend forwards you an interesting article at work and you thought it was really funny or really insightful or really interesting, just pass it on to your kids. It could be in English, it could be in Chinese, just pass it on. That's what my mom did with me all the time. You know, she would just send me Wall Street Journal articles in either language. And if it was in Chinese, I would, you know, slowly, very, very slowly work my way through it. My mom called it 捉虫. But, you know, if it was interesting enough, I would keep going. And then after I read it, like let's say she comes home from work, I will ask her, oh, so I got that article you sent me, and we'll talk about it. Or if I'm in the car with her, I'll be like, oh, did you get that article I sent you or emailed you the other day? And we'll talk about it. So definitely take advantage of that. Take advantage of the news. It's very, very easy, again, to access news these days because of the technology that we have. The New York Times, Time Magazine, Washington Post, Huffington Post are some of my favorites. The Economist, Business Week, International Business Times. I'm a news junkie. I don't have games on my phone. I have one game on my phone. And then every other thing I do on my phone, if I'm like on a train going somewhere or if I'm bored, I'm always reading the news. I just read a lot of articles. So you sort of want to get them into that habit. And don't try to like buy Time Magazine articles and shove them in front of their face. Just get a subscription. You should read it, you know, and just leave it lying around the house. And out of natural curiosity, human curiosity is a very powerful tool. Out of natural curiosity, the kids will look. That's how I got into reading these things, was my parents just had a Times subscription. I don't know who read it, to be honest, and I don't know why we had the subscription, but they were there, and when I was bored, I would read them. And I started with, the easy articles, the comedy section, the joke section, the pop culture section, and then eventually I would start getting into the heavier articles. So just get subscriptions to these things and leave them lying around the house. And out of curiosity, your kids will more than likely pick them up. Other parents asked how to strengthen critical thinking and logic skills. I think just this discussion that that I talked about, talking to your kids about current events, is highly useful. Always ask them questions. For example, recently there was a shooting down in South Carolina, and I don't know if my mom's heard about it yet, but once she gets home from work today, I'll probably ask her about it. And this is a little backwards. This is me probably developing my mom's critical thinking skills. But I'll ask her, like, oh, what do you think about this? Like, do you think it was, what do you think is your reaction to the media fallout on this? I might pull up a YouTube video to show her. That was an excellent video, by the way. And I'll be like, oh, do you agree with his points? So discuss and ask questions, and that will force them to think about these things and encourage them to ask you questions. The other thing I want to mention, though, is my mom has a problem with this, is don't just stick to WeChat for your news. So I went to Johns Hopkins, and that was in Baltimore, and as many of you know, there was a huge riot in Baltimore towards the end of April. And the night that the riots were happening, my school shut down. Some of my friends said that they could see fires burning in the city from their balcony because we were all in apartment buildings. And it was just very scary, honestly. We felt very safe. Like, Hopkins is very safe. I'll just put that out there for parents who are concerned about kids who are there or might be interested. Hopkins is very, very safe. The police force around the campus was insane. But I was joking with my friend. I was like, oh, I don't think the news hit WeChat yet because my mom hasn't called me in a panic. So the next day, I texted my mom just to tell her I'm okay. And then she called me and was like, you texted me, so I decided to go on WeChat to see what was going on. And that was when I found out about the riots. And I was like, wow, I was actually right. Like, my mom gets all of her news from WeChat. So know that there's more beyond the forwarding news things that go around that app. I told my mom, I was like, wow, you're a lovely mother there. Like, your daughter's in a city with riots and you're waiting on the Chinese news to get it to you. So just access as many news sources as possible, and that's how you're going to get the biggest development and interest in debating, because so many of these activities are dependent upon policy issues. How to develop humor skills and communication. I think that depends on the person, and I think that depends on the environment around them. Some kids have very funny parents or very funny teachers, and that will reflect in the way these kids communicate. Otherwise, reading funny things, watching comedies, people like Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, all those people are very great comedians, Tina Fey. So I think having exposure to that type of communication will eventually develop humor skills. What are the ways to make points clearly and effectively? Be very, very, very organized. I'm going to break out of my PowerPoint really quick and show you how I organized this talk. I took all the questions and I blocked them. I don't know if you guys can see this clearly, but I took all the questions and I blocked them into categories. And I am literally going through these questions category by category. So, how do you make points effectively? That you just have to be very, very organized. And then beyond that, it's just practice. Continuing with development, one parent asked, if your child's voice isn't loud enough, how to deal with that. I always tell my kids they have to have very good posture, not because of appearance, but because of basic human physiology. If your back is straight, it opens up your ribs. That opens up your lung capacity, and that's where the majority of your voice comes from, is from your lung capacity and your diaphragm. So number one, you have to have good posture and project outwards. Beyond that, it just comes with practice and sort of luck. Some people just have a very naturally loud voice. I have a surprisingly loud voice for how small my body is. I'm very, very skinny, but I'm really loud. Other people just are really quiet to begin with. My mom told me, because I went to her, she told me last year, I was talking to her about my students from the debate program, and she told me, don't push the kids too hard to be loud. And she actually said, 小孩什么小孩中气不足，所以嗓子就没那么大 just to begin with. So just understand that as they get older, particularly as they hit their teenage years, their vocal cords will let them get louder. What my mom told me as a kid was to just say it with a lot of force, like 很大力的去说, and hopefully that would like push the air out of my throat and make it louder. But you sort of just have to let nature take its course on that one. As next question, I was a little bit confused with, partially because I think the 4 characters that should have been in English weren't in English, which is the last 4, so I actually don't know what that means. But I think I understand the gist of the question is how to get a kid to, see things from a different angle or look at it from a different viewpoint. I think this is very difficult, particularly if it's a very controversial issue, like let's say abortion or stem cell research, like those really heavy topics where people take very split sides. And you see that all the time even today, like people will take a side and stick with it, and if like they meet someone that doesn't understand their same viewpoint, they just sort of jump on them, and that's understandable, especially if it's something that you're very passionate about. But as a parent, I think it's important that if you're discussing an issue with your child, you need to, because you're the adult in the conversation, you need to be the adult and take a very objective stance. Don't like assume that what your child is saying is wrong, even if their viewpoint is 100% like 180 degrees away from what you're saying. You need to respect their viewpoint and just tell them like, okay, well, here's how I see it, and give them your argument, and then let them respond. But don't ever say, oh, this is wrong, or yell at them, or things like that. I know one parent, like a sort of a family friend, brought up the Harvard admissions case with her daughter, and they were, she just asked her she asked her daughter what she thought about the case. And her daughter, like many, many, many ABC children, thought that Harvard was fine. She was like, I don't think Harvard did anything wrong. And her mom just sort of jumped on her and was like, oh, like, how can you say that? They're clearly discriminating against your own people. When you apply to college, you're going to get screwed over and things like that. Don't do that. Even if it's completely the opposite of what you believe, you want to be the adult in the conversation and have a very objective way of presenting your argument. And don't do so with the point of making them change their side. If you present a good argument, a good debater will be able to sway anyone. So you just have to present your facts and your opinions very clearly, and see what they think. And if they don't agree, that's perfectly okay. The last couple of things with Peiyang and development is confidence is a huge thing. Some parents asked what I thought was the most important characteristic or personality. I would absolutely say confidence. You want to, as a general rule, you need to be able to get up in front of a lot of people and talk. So how to develop that, particularly in really shy kids. And I think as young as possible, you want to encourage them as much as possible. Even in very little things that feel like they have nothing whatsoever to do with debating. When I was a kid, I remember I was 5 or 6 years old. McDonald's used to give out free ice cream if kids asked for them from the counter. So my mom would basically told me, go to the counter and say, may I have a kitty cone? And then she would just send me up there by myself, and I'd ask the lady, may I have a kitty cone? And then they'd give me an ice cream. So just little things like that. My mom was always asking me. When I was in 3rd grade, she handed me money and told, we stopped by the supermarket the night before a field trip, and she told me, go to the deli counter and tell them you want a 1/4 pound of whatever slice of meat you want, grab a couple rolls, and go, buy your lunch pretty much. So she handed me money. I went and bought my lunch, and it was fine. She told me exactly what to say, exactly where to find it, and I just had to go do it. And I think the guy like actually shortchanged me. So I had to go back and ask him for $2 back because he just shortchanged me by $2. So very little things like that from an early age will build their confidence. And you want to do that when they're young and shameless and have nothing to be afraid of and nothing to lose. As they get older, you want to always be praising them. If they make a good argument, tell them they made a good argument. Even if it's the argument opposite of what you're trying to say, you want to acknowledge that they did a good job. And give them as many opportunities as possible. When I was in 5th or 6th grade, my mom had a piano recital in our living room. She invited a bunch of kids from the neighborhood that played piano, and we just had a little recital in the living room. And that helped me a lot with performance anxiety for piano because these were all like friends and family. So, if you guys have house parties or New Year's Eve parties or karaoke parties or whatever, don't like put the kids aside at a kiddie table. Let them sit with the adults and let them listen and let them contribute. And just put them in environments where they might not have to talk, but they will have the opportunity to talk. The last thing, and that's, for shy kids, that helps a lot because that sort of eases them into an environment where they're going to have to present in front of people. You can't just go from 0 to 60. You have to take it step by step. The last big point I want to make is don't underestimate how smart your kids are. Children have an enormous capacity to understand very serious issues. So last summer for the debate program, we did a Model UN week where this was a couple weeks into the program, and I sort of had an understanding of how much the kids could handle. And I emailed all the parents and I said, this week for Model UN, we want to talk about the Gaza Strip crisis in Israel that was happening. Like, it was a very current issue. And I just wanted to get the parents' approval because this was a very sensitive topic. It was violent, it was warfare, it was religious, it was like terrorist activity. There was a lot going on. And the parents all okayed it. And again, these were kids from like 4th through 7th grade. And this is the result that I got. They handled it extremely well. These are 2 kids redrawing a map of Israel. The week that we did the debate, every morning they would bring in new research that they had done at night, and that every morning during class I would pull out Twitter and read them the news basically and tell them what was going on, and they would immediately react and adjust their discussion accordingly. So again, they look very tiny in this picture. You can see how young they are. And what I found was amazing was the week that we were debating, Israel and Palestine had drawn a ceasefire agreement for 72 hours, and the 72 hours were set to end the Friday of that week. So, that was something that we watched very closely because we wanted to see what the ceasefire agreement would come out to. And that Friday morning, one of my students came up to me and he said, "Hey, Jess, guess what happened today?" And I was like, "No, what happened?" He's like, "The ceasefire ended, remember?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. I haven't had a chance to look at the news yet." And he was like, "Well, my parents had the TV on this morning, so that's very important. That's just what his parents do is they have the TV on in the morning just running on the news." And he's like, "Yeah, my parents had the TV on in the morning, and I was eating breakfast, and I saw that the ceasefire ended, and as soon as it ended, Palestine fired on Israel." So they understood the topic, and they were interested enough to follow it. So I just want to emphasize, don't underestimate how smart your kids can be. They're very, very, very bright, and they have enormous capacity to understand very complex topics. So this was one of the hardest topics that I myself would have had gotten as a high schooler, was the Gaza Strip crisis. So they handled that very well. So the last big category of questions is resources and camps. I would say number one, go to your school district and just ask what's available, or not you as a parent, but ask your kids to go ask their teachers, ask their friends what's available in terms of debate activity. The other best resource is the world around you, the news, Facebook, Twitter, and the people around you. You want to draw all these resources into very organic, very natural feeling discussions. Don't like print out a list of debate topics from the internet and go through them like a checklist. Debating is very different from reading and writing in that with reading and writing, you could print out a list of prompts or print a reading list and go through it, check mark one by one. With debate, it feels very forced and it feels very fake. You want to go with what is happening around you. That's how you're going to get the most productive and most effective and organic debate. So just pull from that, as I mentioned, pull from the vast resources that technology has given us. A lot of people ask about camps, coaches, classes, things like that. And one of my students' moms actually asked me about private coaching versus class setting. There is a difference. They handle different things. So for example, private coaching, when I work private with my kids, I get very nitpicky. I'll say things, I'll talk about how their eye contact is working, whether they're projecting enough, whether their posture looks good. We'll go through a speech word by word, and I'll ask them to say a sentence and be like, no, that sounds awkward. Say it again. No, that still sounds awkward. We need to change a word so it sounds natural and so you're comfortable saying it. I'll time them like an OCD lady. Like one student I worked with, her speech was timed down to 4 minutes and 11 seconds. And I told her, I was like, you need to be anywhere between 4 and 4:15. And we just kept going until she settled into that time frame. So that's the benefit of private coaching, is you can get very, very nitpicky with one person and hone in on where their weak spots are. But there's, a huge thing is the class setting gives you the group discussion and it gives you the audience. With private coaching, their only audience is me, maybe their parent. I can't materialize 10 to 20 bodies out of thin air. But with a class setting, you have that entire audience. And for a shy kid, that is something you're going to have to deal with, is that audience looking at you. So that's the big difference between private versus class setting. The other thing with a class setting is there's a lot of give and take. So for private, the only person giving feedback is me, and the only person critiquing is me. But with a class setting, you have like 10 other people to draw strengths and weaknesses from. They'll tell you where you did well, and they'll also tell you like that point makes no sense. Or they will attack a point and be like, well, you said this, I believe, A, B, C, D. And then a third person in the class be like, well, I agree with point B that you just made, but I also think that point E and F are valid. So that class setting gives you multiple people to bounce ideas off of, which you just can't do with one-on-one coaching. The type of teacher or program to look for, I think, obviously you need to have someone that's very experienced with debating. So my requirements for teachers for this year and last year and this year is they have to have a lot of debate experience, but on top of that, they also need to have a lot of teaching experience, because it's one thing to debate well, it's another thing to be able to teach it. I think the type of program depends on your child's age and your region. Like I said, debate activities vary depending on what part of the country you're in, so you want to go for something that they're going to be interested in and that your area actually offers. On top of that, teachers, I think, should also be people who are very in tune with the news, so they can pull topics from wherever, whether it's a past topic, whether it's a current topic, and be able to talk about it. One year for the Model UN Conference at my school, I did the Paris Peace Conference, which took place in 1919. It was the Bali Hehui. And it was a historical conference, so this wasn't a current issue. This was a past issue that already happened. And as a chair, I had to control what was being discussed, because I told the committee, our timeline starts January 1919. All the information you know from after January 1919 does not apply to our committee. So in terms of topic control, they need to be able to handle the information flow for a variety of topics. The last biggest resource I would say is multidisciplinary. So debating, it is very oral. It's, you know, very, very based on what comes out of your mouth. But there's also a lot of connection to writing and research. So if you can write well, I personally think it's not that big of a jump to go from being able to write well to being able to debate well, because at the core of both disciplines, there's the point of making an argument. So in writing, you need to argue a point or persuade people to see your point or to explain something. And that's very similar in debating, that core concept. Same thing with research. You know, how you research, the type of facts you look for, that process is very similar in writing and debating. So being able to develop a multidisciplinary approach is very useful, and the skills are transferable. Obviously, there are skills that are exclusive to writing and exclusive to debate, but there is a significant amount of overlap. So I think being able to help, you know, that core overlap, being able to form an argument, being able to express a point, know what to research, know how to research, know what quotes to look for, what types of facts to look for, how to present those facts. That overlap is applicable across a variety of fields, and developing that overlap will ultimately develop debating skill and writing skill, research skills, things like that. Trying to think if there's anything else I missed. I believe that is everything I have for you today. Thanks so much for listening. And let me see the time. It's 8:51. Okay, so I think I'm going to take a couple of questions, and then I do need to head out because I'm meeting friends later tonight, actually. So let me open this question box and see what we got. Okay, there's a lot of questions. Okay. Okay, so a question from Lisa. Is the Model Congress you refer to the same as National Forensics League Congress? I don't think so. I didn't do forensics, but I know that forensic style debate is very different from the Model Congress simulation, so I think they're two different types of debate. Where are you holding the elementary summer camp for mock trial? That I'm located in New Jersey, so the camp is in Millburn, New Jersey. If you're interested in finding out more, you can contact me privately. But because this is a seminar, I don't want to like do any advertisement or promotion for them. Since you did Model UN for all 4 years of school, how much time did it take? As I said, Model UN took up a lot of time. In high school, right before the research paper writing process takes a lot of time. Most committees have 2 topics, and our high school had really strict requirements. We had to write a 5-page paper, no more, no less, per topic for a total of 10 pages. And that happened 2 to 3 times a year, so it took up a lot of time. In college, I have friends who are still competing in college. I personally didn't compete in college, but I know in college the time commitment is still pretty heavy. So I would say, I don't know. I just know that right before conference, I would frequently be up till like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, having to complete conference stuff and complete my actual schoolwork. Let me see. What does it say if you take speech and debate class for just a year or 2? I'm not sure I understand the question. So I'm going to move on. How many APs did you take junior and senior year? I took a total of 9 APs, I think. Something like 9 or 10. I don't really remember. Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay, so I see the translation of that one Chinese question that I couldn't read. Okay, how did you help your child overcome the side that he chose? When the side that he chose is not his preferred, he will lose. Okay. Um, when this happens, obviously you're going to be given topics and you're going to be given arguments that you completely disagree with. And I think that's when you need to take a step back and just attack it as objectively as possible. Um, you know, and I think like having a side that's opposite to what you personally feel is actually a strength. For example, myself, I'm very, very pro gun control. I think gun control is a necessity in this country, particularly given the recent shootings. So let's say I was given a side that was, anti-gun control. So what I do is I would write down all my reasons for why I think gun control needs to be enacted, and then I would come up with arguments against every single one of my points. And that's how I would develop an argument and a speech for the side that I was actually given. So take advantage of your natural arguments and use that to strengthen the side that you were assigned. Sounds like I have a good relationship with my mom. What was the best thing that your mom did that you most appreciate? What do teenagers expect from their parents? I think a lot of teenagers expect their parents to just back off a little bit, to be totally honest. That's what I felt as a teenager, and that's sort of what my mom did, was give me space. One of the WeChat groups I'm part of, they talk just about college admissions, and some of the questions on there I'm just very shocked by. Things like, if I'm not ready for this weekend's SAT2, can I reschedule? Or like, where can I find the Common App essay? How many Common App essays? Just like very basic things that their children should be able to find for themselves. And what I can imagine the situation being is this kid already knows what he has to do. He already has the information. He's just so overwhelmed by the process that he doesn't want to talk to his parents about it. He just wants to get it done. And I can imagine the parents coming home and be like, oh, I saw on WeChat that so-and-so did this, or so-and-so said this. Did you do that? Are you sure? So I think as a teenager, you need to give them an amount of trust, and a trust that they know what they're doing, and give them that space to figure it out. I'm the first child in my family, so my mom was honestly very clueless because I'm the first one, and one of her neighbors mentioned, a very, very good family friend of ours. Her daughter is several years older than me, so she mentioned to my mom, like, oh, junior year, they have to like take all their exams that year, SATs, APs, whatnot. So my mom was like, wait, what, really? Like, Jess never told me this. So she comes home in a panic, and she's like, did you know that you have to like register for all these exams? I was like, yeah, I know. I've already got the timeline planned out. So once I told her that, she was like, okay, fine. Like, she knew that I had it down, and she trusted me with that. So I think a huge thing is just to trust them. The other best thing that my mom did for me was to know when to force me to relax. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, particularly senior year, I wanted to get into a top-tier school. And I was so stressed out over application essays. And, I was like having breakdowns, and I'd start crying for no reason. So one day my mom literally just came into my room, saw me hunched over the laptop, not typing anything. I think it was my computer. And she just goes, save everything, we're going shopping. And she just dragged me out. And I'm not sure if we bought anything, but she just made me get out of the house. So that's probably one of the best things that my mom could have done for me. Next question. Did you go to any debate camps or have a private teacher? No. I honestly just like to talk a lot as a kid. I was always talking as a kid. 流水账, that's what my mom said. Can you point out some good online resources to debating, especially for younger kids? I can't think of any off the top of my head. I know some places do Toastmaster meetings, which are like nonprofit organizations geared towards helping kids with debating. So I didn't do that in my area, but I know some areas have very active Toastmaster organizations. Otherwise, online resources. There is one website, I think, I have to find it. I forgot what the URL is, but there's a master list of topics on there, and it gives like pros and cons of different topics. And that I found really helpful when I was researching, but I forgot what the link was exactly. I'd have to find it. From Helen, how did you learn Chinese? My mom always spoke Chinese at home, and my grandma was a Chinese teacher. So we always spoke Chinese at home. And then my junior year of college, I went back to Beijing for a semester. So that helped a lot. How to teach the kids to do research. Basically, the way I teach kids how to do research, it depends on the topic, and obviously it depends on how old the kids are, but I give them very specific guidelines, like what type of thing they need to research, which focus areas. Sometimes I even give them like Google these keywords, but they also learn how to do a lot of research at school, I think. I learned how to do a lot of research at school. So I think it depends on it really depends on the child and the topic and the age group. My daughter prefers internet as a resource, but I believe books are better. I used to prefer the internet. Like I used to really, really prefer the internet. Partially because I was honestly too lazy to go to the library because it's not like right by my house. The other thing is the internet's useful because of the keyword search. But once I found that once I got into college, I really liked using books. For my honors thesis, I did a lot of my research out of books and documents, and even if I found things online, I would print them out and highlight. So I wouldn't say any is better. The internet gives you much more current information, but books sometimes are written better and the arguments are formulated better. So it really depends. Okay. Let's see. Shy people. I would try, okay, if your child is really shy, I would try, like, honestly, try to just ease them into it. Give them little things to work with. But, I mean, the other thing is, like, debating's not for everyone. You know, for me, I really like debating and I really like writing, but, you know, let's say like, and it's fine, it's good that my mom was okay with that, but let's say like I didn't have the luck and my mom was very into science or very into math. There was no way in hell she was going to get me to do math or science Olympiad. I just don't like it. You know, I'm not a qualitatively oriented person, so I think you can try to get your kids interested in these things either by talking to them or having them do it with their friend or by having their friend do it. My mom used to do this all the time. She would call my best friend behind my back and have my best friend talk to me. So, but after a point, you know, you just have to understand that it's okay for them to not like it. You know, they're still going to get into college whether or not they do a debating activity. How to decide which topic to choose if both topics are good. I mean, go for the one that interests you more or that you have more information about. You need to talk really fast in debate. Okay, there is one type of debate. I think it's policy, public forum. It might be public forum, or it's either public forum or policy debates where they talk really, really fast. I personally think that's unnecessary. I was taught to talk slow, and I've always talked really fast, and my teachers always told me, you know, you have to talk really, really slow. When we went to nationals, our teachers warned us that, you know, we're from Jersey, we're from the Northeast, we naturally talk faster than a lot of places in the country. And he said, if you get a judge from the South and you talk the pace you are now, they're not going to understand a word you say. So I personally think it helps to talk slower, but policy debates, I think, is the one where they talk really fast. How will you know whether you like debating or not? That's like asking if you know whether or not you like chocolate or spicy food. You just know, sort of, in your gut. Our debate clubs are mainly run by parents. However, I don't think many of them have good qualifications to run a debate club. Have you ever experienced things like this? I mean, I haven't personally, my high school and the staff at college at Hopkins were all very, very highly qualified. But I think it like depends on what you mean by good qualifications. I mean, some high schools really train the kids. Like my high school was very, very OCD about how we debated and how we presented an argument. Other high schools do it more just for the fun of it and for the experience. And the teachers don't get very involved because they don't want to pressure the kids too much. So it really depends on how you define good qualifications. What would you suggest for kids who just finished ninth grade to do in the summer? Relax, because that's your first year. Honestly, high school just gets harder until December of senior year. So take time to relax. Read a lot. I would say read, relax. Yeah, that's pretty much what I did, actually. My high school summers was I would read books, relax. Oh, and then I wrote books because I was very into writing back then. So just pick up a hobby and do it, and force them to go outside because it's the summer and they need to be outside. So do that. Okay, I'm going to answer this last question, and I think I will call it a night. How can I start my own debate club? I mean, different schools have different processes for starting clubs, so I would contact the principal or like the vice principal, just contact someone in administration. Have the kids do this. The parents don't touch it, let them do it. Contact someone in administration and ask them what the requirements are to start a club. For my high school, I think we needed a minimum of like however many students. So, and then ask around and get, fulfill all those requirements. And then you need to start looking for competitions to join. So that requires a lot of online research. And more likely than not, you need to find an advisor. So obviously it varies by school what the steps are. But the biggest thing, if you're going to start your own organization or club, you have to be super, super organized. So go in with that preparation. It just doesn't happen overnight. It's a lot of meeting with people, and you're going to do a lot of talking to various offices and friends and family and teachers and things like that. And be prepared to do a lot of like prep work, like writing things and organizing spreadsheets and things like that. So starting a club isn't as easy as you think. Take it from someone who's tried. Yeah, so just be ready to do the back end work is my biggest suggestion. So yeah, so that's all I have for tonight. Thanks again for listening, and we'll, hope to see you again sometime in the future whenever I do another one.
Okay, thanks, Jess. I think it's a very good seminar. Thank you all for attending. So, Jess, how many minutes do you have before you leave?
Pretty soon. I should probably head out in like 5-10 minutes or so.
Okay. Before we go, because this is the first time we use this software, seems that it's going well. There's one feature we didn't test. I saw some people raise their hands. So far on my screen, I see Stephen Wang raise your hand. Usually this is a classroom, so if you raise your hand, you want to ask a teacher a question. So far I saw you take the hand off. So anybody who really wants to ask a question in audio, please raise your hand. We can give it a try. If you know what question you want to ask by talking. Anybody ready?
I was wondering what that was.
If not, I think I don't see anybody raise their hands. Okay, Anna. Oh, Anna just raised her hand off. Okay, I guess it is okay. So nobody is ready to talk. Everybody is interested in typing in the question. Okay, thank you, Jess. And for all the group members, this is the first of the 2 webinars that Jess is going to give. And to reiterate, Jess is also a writer. Jess published several books. You can find them in Amazon, and also for the books and Jess, and you can check our chat history. So the next webinar by Jess will be, the time will be determined, depends on Jess' schedule.
Yeah, I have to check
Thank you very much for attending. Thank Jess. Great seminar.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right, bye.